So today we're going over how to win the war of investing. This is going to be lessons from 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. And I'd created this presentation yesterday, but this is actually the day after. And basically, yesterday was a really rough day for the markets. Virtually everything is down about 7%. If we pull up here, gold basically was down $100 or something like that. Sibanye was down 6%, Impala down 6%, Grand Columbia down 6%. Basically, it was all red. Some of these have bounced back now, but yeah, yesterday it was all red. So, introduction. Robert Greene is one of my favorite authors, and my favorite books of his is The 33 Strategies of War. And I believe that the lessons from his book can be applied to find success in all areas of life. We continually have battles within ourselves, and by learning how to effectively fight those battles, we can conquer ourselves. I feel like investing is a very important area where you can be your own greatest enemy. And I'm going to cover the ideas from page 97 to 100 of Robert's book, The 33 Strategies of War. And kind of just in the context of what's going on right now, just that the Fed made some announcement that they thought that inflation wasn't transitory, something like that, and they're going to be doing rate hikes in early as 2023 or something like that. And so the market just kind of like a pan sell off where everything sold off by about 5 or 6%. And to me, it's kind of like it's telling that we use red and kind of green. It's like red is a sign of blood and losses and stuff like that. So it's a very warlike kind of atmosphere in the markets. So here's a kind of the first reading. I think this is on the first page of this chapter. Pick your battles carefully. And this is strategy 8. We all have limitations. Our energies and skills will only take us so far. Danger comes from trying to surpass our limits. Seduced by some glittering prize into overextending ourselves, we end up exhausted and vulnerable. You must know your limits and pick your battles carefully. Consider the hidden costs of war. Time lost, political goodwill squandered, an embittered enemy bent on revenge. Sometimes it's better to wait, to undermine your enemies covertly rather than hitting them straight on. If battle cannot be avoided, get them to fight on your terms. Aim at their weaknesses. Make the war expensive for them and cheap for you. Fighting with perfect economy. You can outlast even the most powerful foe. So, application to investing. I think a lot of people spread themselves too thin by investing in far too many stocks. Rick Rule recommends that you only buy a stock if you're willing to invest 1 hour a month into keeping up with that company. I really like this idea. Last year, I came to the conclusion that oil stocks were going to rise dramatically, and I positioned myself in small cap oil stocks that were at deeply depressed levels. Because basically, kind of my reasoning is that there was never going to be a lockdown as severe as the beginning of the lockdown in 2020 in April or something like that. There was just this dramatic overreaction to it by everybody because we just didn't know what COVID was, and so everything got shut down. And while there was more lockdowns for different parts of the country, different parts of the world, they were never as severe. Some places stayed open and more actions and more things kind of opened up as time went forward. And so my kind of thought process is that the oil demand low is never going to be as low as it was in April. And we kind of hit the low and we're going to only go up from there. Like we'd have an upwards trajectory or trend would kind of be the best way to describe it. But then in October came around, and the pessimism about the economy, and in particular Marin Katusa's comments about oil's future, scared me out of my positions. So I really got into finding Marin Katusa's ideas. He's a brilliant marketer and really a brilliant self-promoter. And he was very bearish on oil, talking about how Suncor was very unprofitable and all these kind of things, and that it's kind of like a lot of these oil stocks they were going to plunge even further. And it didn't play out that way. So I basically ended up, I sold out shortly before the lows. And if I had held on to my positions, I would have been up around 400 to 500% in the following 8 months. So one of the companies I really liked was Cardinal Energy. And it had been about $2.50, $3 or something like that in the year before COVID. And then it was trading around 50 cents in the summer after, it's like summer during COVID. And so it was basically, to me, the oil price had dropped from about $60 a barrel to $40 a barrel at that time. So it was about like 33% drop or whatever. But the stock had dropped, Cardinal had dropped 80%. So that drop seemed disproportionate to the drop in oil. And so it seemed to me, it's like, well, what if the oil price came back to $60 a barrel? It would make sense that the stock would go back up to $2.50, $3, which it subsequently has. And that would be like a 500, 600% increase. And so luckily enough, I helped my mom get into the stock and one of my friends get into stock. And they held on to it through a lot of the gains and made tremendous amounts of money. So lessons learned. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this experience. A major one was I should have learned more about the companies I was holding. For me, if I know the intrinsic value of a stock, it makes it much easier to hold when the market goes against me. So currently, current my holdings are Northern Dynasty, Grand Columbia, Impala Platinum, and Sibanye Stillwater. And I have a deep understanding of what their business model is and what their financial position is. And this helps me keep my emotions in check. But when I had this portfolio of 30 different oil stocks, I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know what the intrinsic value of Cardinal Energy was. And maybe the intrinsic value was like $1.20. Like even if they went bankrupt, maybe selling off all their assets would be equivalent to $1.20 per share or something like that in intrinsic value. But because I didn't know, it was much easier to shake me out. But now that I've got a full understanding of Impala Platinum and Sibanye Stillwater, it's like we have this drop, and it's like Sibanye Stillwater right here was trading close to $20 just like a week ago when they announced that they were going to do a 5% stock buyback program. And now they're down like approximately 20% from that point. And it's absolutely nuts. But I was able to finish out my positions in both these companies. Now I've got both my positions basically fully allocated. And I'm really looking forward to it because I'm expecting both these stocks to be paying about $1 dividend come like August, September is when that dividend should be getting paid out. And that's just going to be a massive return. That's just half of the dividend. They're going to be paying probably about $2 to $3 per year in dividends. So it's just going to absolutely be fantastic. So the next quote from this chapter: in the utilization of a theater of war, as in everything else, the strategy calls for economy of strength. The less one can manage with, the better. But manage one must, and here, as in commerce, there is more to it than mere stinginess. Karl von Clausewitz. So another piece of the investing battle is managing your expenses. I got to ride the great silver run from $20 up to $50 in 2010 to 2011, and it was absolutely a fantastic ride. I had about 1,000 ounces of silver, so every $1 rise in the price meant $1,000 in paper profits. And I was basically going to university at this time, so it was feeling pretty good. And I felt like an absolute genius, and it totally went to my head. I remember I'd go into my statistics class every day, and one of my buddies in that class, he'd basically just be like, ask me like, hey, so silver up today? And I'm like, silver's up today. And it was just because it was happening so consistently, that's just kind of how it went. And I just thought it was because I thought it was my brilliance. And yeah, I got humble pie very later on. So I ended up spending all those paper profits and more. I started a habit of buying $750 Cordovan shoes. I really enjoy Eldon shoes, and I end up having like 13 of these pairs of shoes or something like that. And just polishing them and keeping them in shape was like consuming hours a day. It was just nuts. I also bought like a $200 a month front sight gun membership, even though I'd never shot a gun and hated the idea of traveling to Las Vegas, even though I'm a Canadian, for health reasons. And so I got into these very ridiculous tracks of spending money on stupid stuff because I just thought I was a genius and this money would never stop. So if we go back to the quote here, it's like ideally is that you want to, the less one can manage with, the better. And in investing, it's like the less expenses you have, the better off you're going to be. It's like you're able to basically better manage your resources and put them to the kind of allocation that they should be going to. So now I realize how important it is to keep my expenses low and maintain a solid income. So it's like if you're saving money each month and adding that to your investments, it's going to be nearly impossible to fail over the longer term. Like even if stocks like decline and stuff like that, if you still got your money and you're actually like, you're knowing what you're looking for investing, you're buying good value and stuff like that, it's like you're just going to be able to buy them for cheaper and cheaper. And so it's like if you've got that continuous like solid income and you're saving a good percentage of that, it's like the investing game seems pretty simple. So here's the story from Robert Greene's, like that first page in there, 98. He shares a story of King Pyrrhus, I believe it is, something like that, and the Romans. The king was hired as a mercenary to fight off the Romans, and he thought of himself as Alexander the Great Reborn, and he planned to use his victory against the Romans to fuel the building of a Western empire. So basically what had happened is there was this, like, I think this city-state in kind of like the southern part of Italy, and they were kind of sticking their nose up against the Romans. I think they'd killed off some of the navy of the Romans who kind of came into their harbor, and then the Romans sent some diplomats to kind of like smooth things over, and then basically the city-state basically just kind of snubbed them and insulted them or something like that. And so the Romans were trying to figure out what to do with this. And so this city-state had lots of money, and so they basically went and like hired King Pyrrhus as a mercenary to come and basically fight a war against the Romans for them. And he kind of promised them like, yeah, like we'll get lots of armies for you together, and we'll kind of like, make things super easy. But when he got there, like King Pyrrhus, he basically was like realized it's like they hadn't bought any other armies for him to fight with, and so he was mostly going to be just using his own men. And so he started to train the people that were in the village, and he declared martial law. But when the Romans heard that he had come to the city, they basically instantly marched their legions out to fight him because they didn't want to let him get like a toehold in the area and get positioned properly. So he ended up fighting the Romans, but with each victory he achieved, he lost countless veterans and generals of his own army. So basically, he fought the Romans, kicked their butt. First time it was with elephants, and he kind of smashed them. But he lost a lot of his own, his veterans and his generals, like the most valuable parts of his army, they were killed. And then same thing happened again. The Romans came back with another legion as he kind of went and tried to make them pursue peace. Because basically what he did, he's like, oh wow, these Romans are a lot stronger than I expected. And so he basically took his army and kind of chased them down to Rome, trying to sue for peace. He's like, hey, we'll split up Italy 50-50. I get 50, you get 50, and then we get peace. But the Romans were insulted by this, and they're just like, no, we're going to spring up more armies to fight him off. And so basically with each battle he won, he fought them, he won, but it made him weaker and weaker. More of his generals, more of his veteran, experienced army soldiers were killed off. And so it's kind of like, this is the idea of a Pyrrhic victory, is that you win, but you lost so much. It cost you so much, it wasn't a win. So kind of a good example of it is like entrepreneurship. A lot of times, it's like you build a successful business, but it ends up costing you your marriage, or it ends up costing your relationship with your kids or your friends or your health or whatever it is. And so it comes as a Pyrrhic victory. It's like that you won and you got the business success, but you lost the other important things in your life. So it can be very easy to let the fantasies of investing take over your life. I imagined that I was going to be the next Warren Buffett or Jesse Livermore, and I destroyed myself in the process. I figured if I learned investing at a young age, that I could just live off my investments for the rest of my life. I want to skip the steps of finding a good job, learning the valuable life skills that can be sold profitably, and then building my own business. And it cost me a lot. But after the market humbled me, and this is basically when silver price crashed from $50, big crash was to like $32 within a couple days. But then it just drifted down back towards $20, $15 or something like that. I was kind of like, okay, this didn't work out. And so I ended up selling off my silver to fund my business that I started as I was graduating from university. And then went out and got beat by the market and kind of figured out how to sell, how to build a business, and I ended up getting hired. And that was one of the best things. Like one of my best clients hired me as a marketing manager and saved my butt because my business was not profitable. But he taught me how to, basically gave me kind of a blank check budget to learn and actually figure out what worked in marketing and what didn't. And like when I started, I was all about print marketing and advertising in the 9x12 system, where you basically get this giant postcard and you get like 15 different businesses to advertise on it. And basically it's like if you get the whole thing filled up, it's like you get 50% of the money is profit. And so you can make like $3,000, $4,000 on one of these cards, and advertisers get very cheap cheap advertising that's very effective and gets out to a lot of people and stuff like that, and kind of stands out. But what I eventually learned after working with my client is that basically it was Google AdWords that really drove the business for local businesses, and it was getting the reviews up. And like once you have really high reviews, like that's such a game changer. And then on the website, it's getting website chat. It's like you need to have a 24-hour, 7 days a week automated chat, or not automated, a live chat that they're basically getting the name, number, and email of potential clients, and then you can call them up when you're ready to, like when you have the time and allocation, and just following up with those leads. And those are the big factors of driving for business. But yeah, so I basically went and learned local business marketing and created a lot of success for the company I worked for. And the big thing is that I actually learned the skills and I could use them for myself. So when COVID hit, and I basically broke out and started my own business. I was like, okay, this is going to be a rough time. It's like, there's not going to be much we're going to be able to do for business. And just like my whole job's going to be in dire straits. And then there was also the COVID money for Canadians. We had CERB and CRB and stuff like that. So I was like, this is the perfect time for me to start my business, that I'm going to be getting paid by the government to actually figure out how to figure out my own business. And hopefully by the time that the COVID money's done, I'm making a full-time income from my business. It took a while to pick up, but now it's providing me a solid amount of clients. I've probably got I'm doing math tutoring. I probably got about 8 to 10 clients a week currently, and that's probably because it's June and it's quite busy right now. But I have a good feeling that it's going to just pick up again come fall. It just seems like the clients are streaming in quite well, and I'm doing work that I love. Like I absolutely love working with the kids, and it's been very educational for me to work with different types of kids and see what works and see what doesn't, and kind of having patience and stuff like that, because I'm a very quick learner. But I've found that with the students who are really struggling, who are like 40 or 50% students, it's like we've got a lot of backtracking to do and building up the foundational skills. And so it's helped teach me a lot of patience about how to be a better kind of tutor, teacher, and kind of life example and life coach. And in this process, during this last year, I've also been relearning investing. And that's been absolutely fantastic. And because I've had the experiences, like I've had the ups, I've had the downs, I was able to kind of come at it with a more seasoned perspective. And I was able to help my friends and family start getting into investing and kind of figuring out Wealthsimple and stuff like that. And that's been absolutely fantastic. Like my mom's portfolio has been up about 60% over the last year, and my best friend's portfolio is about 50%. My mom basically just bought the oil stocks that I recommended and just held on to them instead of selling out like me, and it's just done fantastic. And then my best friend, she basically created her own trading system, kind of using a turtles momentum style trading, and it's very counterintuitive, but it's been working fantastic for her. She has about a 40% success rate, but for basically the trades that she wins like $150, and the trades that she loses like $30. So it's just, the odds are very much in her favor. And part of that's just because it's a bull market, but I think it's a brilliant system. So I think for King Pyrrhus, he would have been better off building a solid life that he loves. So basically managing his small kingdom the best he could, and then making small wars if it made sense, but really focusing on how do I provide the most value as a ruler, a leader, making my people better, making our kingdom better and stuff like that, instead of just making it worse by trying to go conquer and having all this ego attached to it and trying to get out ahead of yourself. I think it's a lot better to kind of step back and be like, okay, what can I do with the here and now, and not kind of overextending your reach. So a major lesson I want to teach people around me is try to build their life into a pantheon. That you want to have lots of columns in your life that act as supports for your life. So if you don't know what the Pantheon is, it's kind of like this big, long, ancient building, and it's got lots of columns. It's kind of like surrounded by columns. And I look at each column in life is kind of this different thing. So it's like one column in life is investing, and another, and maybe having a solid nest egg. Another is doing work that you love. Another is having a solid group of friends and family. Another is having a productive hobby, like creating YouTube videos. Another is continually learning new things and cultivating a growth mindset. The more of these columns you build into your life, the more stable and resilient you will become. I think financial success is extremely important and can make the rest of your life easier, but I don't think you should ever sacrifice friends, family, or health in order to achieve it. And that's not 100% true because when you're growing and developing, I think that you might have to kind of create your own solitude space so that you can really focus on building up the skills that you need, because there's a lot of times where there's a kind of a crabs in the bucket kind of mentality when you try to create a new change, that the people around you will kind of try to pull you back and stop you from changing. But I think that ideally, once you've kind of gotten past that point, it's like once you've found a modicum of success for you, I think you should look to reinvest and figure out how to bring your friends and your family with you, and how to really get your health and get all the other pieces of your life together, instead of just doubling down and being like more financial success, more financial success, more financial success, and kind of looking to create a more balanced life, because I think that's what kind of provides the happiness and enjoyment. So here we have the last quote for the section. When the weapons have grown dull and the spirits depressed, when our strength has been expended and our resources consumed, then others will take advantage of our exhaustion to arise. Then even if you have wise generals, you cannot make things turn out well in the end. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And there's a few editing errors in there. I think that when it comes to investing, there are a couple of ways we can burn up all our resources. I think that by over-investing in the market, we can really hurt ourselves. Ideally, you want to put money into the market that you're completely fine with losing. And you want to have a solid emergency fund in cash, so that you are fine regardless of what happens to your work or investments. I think investors are also much stronger if they have cash on hand to buy the dip. It was pretty rough seeing Grand Columbia drop to $5 a share, but having some cash to buy the dip, it basically it created a lot more enjoyment. And so I had a few $1,000s, so I bought it around $5, $5.10, $5.15, and then when it came back up to $5.50, $5.75, I sold off that portion. So I actually made profits. I got some extra dividends from that, and it's a lot more enjoyable. And now if the dip happens again, I'd buy some more. And repeat the process. Right now, I mostly focus that money into B2 Gold just because they're paying a 4-cent dividend, and Grand Columbia is only going to be paying a 1.57-cent dividend this month. So it just made more sense that to just get the more dividend with B2 Gold this time. And when the dividend comes in, then I probably maybe sell off some of that. I also think it really helps getting that monthly dividend payment. It's basically, for me, it's like every time I get that dividend, it's like yeah, I just got my little win. So even if the stock hasn't done particularly well, getting that money each month or each quarter or each 6-month period, I think it's quite valuable. I think that you should also really map out your investing weaknesses and figure out how to work with them to find success. The ultimate victory is won without bloodshed, but that requires tremendous preparation and forethought. So it's like, for me, I'm a value investor and I like to set it and forget it. But my best friend, her system is very trading intensive. She's got stop losses that she maintains regularly, and she's also got buyout points. So it probably requires about a half an hour to an hour a day of trading. And she just goes through her system, looks for new stocks, and goes for that. And so for her skill set, it makes a lot of sense. But for me, it's like I've never paid that much attention to it. And it just hurts me inside to sell stocks that I know have tremendous value. So it's kind of figuring out who I am and then trying to work with that. So the conclusion. Pick your stocks extremely carefully. I personally believe you should understand the business and be ready to hold it for 5 to 10 years. You should also be keeping tabs on how each quarter goes for them. I can't remember who gave the example, but it's kind of like the idea that it's like if you bought a McDonald's restaurant, would you always be looking at the price every day about whether you should sell it or buy it, or all that kind of stuff? It's like, no, it's like when you buy a McDonald's restaurant, you're like, okay, I'm buying this because I want the cash flow. I want to be making profits on a monthly, quarterly basis and stuff like that. And that's why I'm holding it. And it doesn't really matter what the real estate prices does or what the price of the business could sell for, because there's all these transaction costs, and it's like, that's not why you buy it. But when we buy stocks, we kind of have a very different mentality. We tend to have a very quick kind of mindset of getting in and getting out. And I think that ideally you should be looking at buying stocks as buying a business. And that's what I try to do with my videos, is actually go into the details of what is this business actually making for money, and does it make sense? And then if you know those numbers, it's like you just become a lot more stable investor, in my opinion. I think it's also good to remember that the best investment you'll ever make is in yourself. I don't believe that everyone should become an investor. Personally, I believe that you should build up about $20,000 in savings before it makes sense to learn investing. So one of the things is that, like Robert Kiyosaki talked about, is that generally it's like you should go through the process of being an employee first, moving to self-employed, then becoming a big business owner where it's like you're no longer the primary doer of the work. And then once you've built a big business that's very successful and it's pushing off so much cash flow you can't reinvest it anymore, that's when you become an investor and you get lower returns. Because when you're just a person, it's like you can invest $200 in yourself, and you might go out and buy a GoPro or something like that, and you learn how to create videos, and you learn how to build a YouTube channel and stuff like that. And it may not pay off in financial terms directly or right away, but it's like that's a skill set that could be tremendously valuable for the next 5, 10 years, or for the rest of your life for the most part. So I think it's, for most people who are starting off, it'd be better to focus on building a career, building a business, building hobbies, building skills, and putting your money into those kind of things than trying to invest it. Because what I've noticed is a lot of people get too emotionally attached to it because they need that money because they don't have very much money. And then it just kind of emotionally consumes them, the ups and downs in the market, and it's just a waste of time and energy. Next lesson is that investing is only one piece of the life puzzle. You should spend time in nature, cook healthy food, develop deep and meaningful friendships, cultivate hobbies that bring you deep pleasure and growth, and just kind of recognizing what the whole picture of life really looks like. Also, I think it's good to maintain a reserve of dry powder and excess resources. You want to have an emergency fund of cash that will support you for 6 months to 5 years. I think COVID kind of showed the need for that. We got lucky in the kind of first world that governments were willing to support a lot of these people, but I think it definitely, you should have that emergency fund because you mean crazy things can happen. And it's like you also want to maintain some extra cash in your investment accounts so that when the dips come, you're ready to buy them. And it's like, for me, like having that money so I could buy today when stocks had dropped off pretty significantly was fantastic. Also, I think it's good to try not to delude yourself and let your ego take hold. Always be learning, growing, and developing, and asking friends and family for feedback, and making sure you get different perspectives from your own. It's like going back to the King Pyrrhus example. It's like he had this model of himself of just being grander than he was. And he also had a model of success that I think was quite a problem. It's like he envied Alexander the Great and the greatness that is associated with him. But personally, I look at Alexander the Great as like one of the biggest failures that you could imagine. Because it's like he just warred and warred and warred. It was just kind of like a very insecure kind of person, in my opinion. It's like he didn't actually get to enjoy any of the fruits of his labor. It's like he wasn't even going back to Macedon, his home. He was just pushing further and further out. And basically he ended up dying in India. So it's like, why? Like, what were you trying to accomplish? To me, it's like, it'd be much more interesting. It's like, okay, like how do we build a very successful like kingdom, and how do we create just laws and increase commerce and all these kind of things? I think that would make for a much more enjoyable life in society. And we've kind of created this hero myth around these kind of warlords, but I actually don't think that what they do is success. It's like there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from it, but I think it's really more valuable to create a life of enjoyment and a life of meaning and a life where we're making the people around us better, and not a life of egotism where we're trying to self-aggrandize ourselves and get attention and all this kind of stuff from other people. So yeah, if you like this kind of video, let me know, because this is kind of like the first try at it. One of the ideas I have is to basically expand this out, and one of my favorite things would be to have somebody teaching 33 Strategies of War in depth and kind of going over the chapters and breaking it down, because it's just such a dense book. but there's so many treasures in here. And I much prefer to listen than I do to read. And so it'd be lovely to have somebody, like in particular Robert Greene, actually create like a 40-hour course just going over each chapter and explain the ideas. And so I thought that if I want Robert Greene to do that, why don't I just start trying to do that and create that myself? So if that's something that you agree with, definitely drop in the comment and let me know, because I'd really appreciate that. Thanks for watching.